The hostess didn't even look up when she said it. "I'm sorry, there are no tables left." 3 words that changed everything. Because standing right in front of her, calm, composed, dressed in understated elegance, was the woman who owned the building. But no one in that restaurant knew it yet. And in less than 1 hour, every single staff member who smirked, ignored, and dismissed her would be clearing out their lockers. Before we get into this unbelievable story, comment below and tell me what country you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Now let's begin. The Friday night rush at La Belle Maison was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers glowed warmly against marble floors. Soft jazz drifted through the air. The restaurant had built its reputation on exclusivity, reservation only, high-profile clientele, a place where names mattered, or at least certain names did. At exactly 7:30 p.m., a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. The valet barely glanced at the driver's side door as it opened. Out stepped a woman in her early 40s, her posture confident, her expression unreadable. She wore a tailored cream blazer over a black silk dress, diamond studs in her ears, and a watch that quietly cost more than the average car in the parking lot. Her name was Vanessa Cole, founder and CEO of Cole Hospitality Group. Net worth, just over $600 million. Owner of 12 luxury properties across 3 states. And as of 6 months ago, the silent majority shareholder of La Belle Maison. But tonight, she wasn't there as an executive. She was there as a guest. A simple reservation under her own name. Vanessa handed her keys to the valet with a polite smile and walked toward the entrance. She noticed the way 2 couples ahead of her were greeted instantly. Warm smiles, enthusiastic welcomes, immediate seating. When it was her turn, the hostess barely lifted her eyes from the screen. "Reservation?" the young woman asked flatly. "Yes, Vanessa Cole, 7:30. The hostess typed slowly. Her nails clicked against the keyboard. She frowned slightly. "I don't see anything." Vanessa's smile didn't fade. "That's strange. It was confirmed 2 days ago. Are you sure you're at the right restaurant?" The hostess replied, finally looking up. There it was, the subtle scan. From Vanessa's natural curls to her minimalist makeup, down to her heels. Not flashy, not loud, just refined. The hostess's lips tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm sure," Vanessa said calmly. The hostess sighed dramatically and typed again. "Well, even if there was a reservation, we're fully booked now. No tables left." Behind Vanessa, another couple stepped inside. The man wore a navy suit, the woman dripping in designer logos. The hostess's face transformed instantly. "Mr. Patterson, right this way. Your table is ready." Vanessa stepped slightly aside as they were escorted in. She said nothing, but she noticed everything. The manager, a tall man with slicked back hair named Richard, approached after a moment. His smile was professional but forced. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," Vanessa replied gently. "Apparently my confirmed reservation doesn't exist." Richard glanced at the hostess, who shrugged. "We're extremely busy tonight," he said smoothly. "Sometimes online systems glitch." "I have the confirmation email," Vanessa said, pulling out her phone. Richard didn't even look at it. "I'm afraid there's nothing we can do. Perhaps try again next week." The dismissal was polite, but it was unmistakable. Vanessa paused. "You're certain there's nothing available?" "Positive." At that exact moment, a busser hurried past and whispered something to the hostess. Vanessa caught only a fragment. "Empty table in the back, just cleared." The hostess shot him a sharp look and shook her head subtly. Vanessa saw it. Richard saw her see it. But he held his smile. "I'm sorry," he repeated. For a long second, silence hovered between them. Then Vanessa nodded once. "All right." She turned and walked out. The hostess exhaled dramatically. Richard adjusted his tie. The jazz music continued as if nothing had happened. But outside, Vanessa did not get into her car. Instead, she stepped aside, pulled out her phone, and made a call. "Marcus," she said calmly when the line connected. "I need you at La Belle Maison. Now." Marcus Hill was the chief operating officer of Cole Hospitality Group. He had worked alongside Vanessa for 11 years. Loyal, sharp, uncompromising. "What happened?" he asked. "I'd rather show you." Within 20 minutes, a second black vehicle pulled up. Marcus stepped out, confusion written across his face as Vanessa explained everything in measured detail. "They denied your reservation?" he asked. "Yes." "And there were empty tables?" "Yes." Marcus's jaw tightened. Up at the glowing sign of the restaurant, she had quietly invested millions into revitalizing. I wanted to see how they treated people when they didn't think anyone important was watching. Marcus understood immediately. This wasn't about a table. This was about culture. Vanessa took a breath. Let's go back in. Inside, the energy had only grown louder. Laughter, clinking glasses. The hostess looked up, and her expression fell. I'm sorry, I thought I. Richard stepped forward again, irritation creeping in. Ma'am, I already explained. Vanessa raised a hand gently. You did. Her tone had changed. Still calm, but colder. However, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Richard folded his arms. And what misunderstanding is that? Vanessa reached into her purse and removed a slim leather card holder. From it, she pulled a single matte black business card and handed it to him. Richard glanced down casually. Then he froze. The color drained from his face. He read it again. Vanessa Cole, founder and CEO, Cole Hospitality Group. Richard looked up slowly. The restaurant noise seemed to fade around them. You're? Yes, Vanessa said quietly. The hostess leaned over to see the card. Her mouth fell open. Marcus stepped forward. Ms. Cole owns 62% of this establishment. The silence was suffocating. Richard began to stammer. I had no idea. That, Vanessa interrupted gently, is precisely the problem. A nearby table had begun to notice. Whispers spread. Vanessa's voice remained steady. I made a reservation under my real name. I arrived on time. I was polite. And I was dismissed without so much as a glance at proof. Richard swallowed hard. There must be some mistake. There was, Vanessa agreed. Several. She turned slowly, taking in the room. How many others have you turned away tonight? She asked the hostess. The young woman couldn't answer. How many reservations have mysteriously disappeared? Vanessa continued. Marcus pulled out his tablet. We pulled the booking logs on the way over, he said. There are 5 confirmed reservations marked as no-show in the last hour. All walk-ins have been seated in their place. Richard's composure crumbled. We prioritize our regular clients. At the expense of integrity? Vanessa asked softly. Her calm was more terrifying than anger. A server nearby whispered, Is she serious? Vanessa heard him. Yes, she replied. She stepped closer to Richard. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending full review. Gasps echoed. She turned to the hostess. You will also be placed on leave. The young woman's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean. Vanessa's voice softened slightly. This isn't about punishment. It's about standards. She addressed the entire staff now. La Belle Maison carries my company's name in its portfolio. And my company was built on one principle: respect. For every guest. Every time. The room was completely silent. When you decide who deserves service based on appearance, you don't just fail them. You fail the brand. Richard looked desperate. Please, Ms. Cole, we can fix this. You should have fixed it when I showed you my confirmation email, she said gently. Marcus stepped forward again. Corporate HR will be conducting interviews starting tomorrow morning. Vanessa nodded. In the meantime, Assistant Manager Elena will assume control for the evening. From the back, a woman stepped forward nervously. Ma'am, I didn't know. I know, Vanessa said. That's why you're still here. Because earlier, when Vanessa had first walked in, there had been one staff member who made eye contact. One who offered a small, apologetic smile. One who seemed uncomfortable with how things were handled. Vanessa noticed everything. She always had. Richard stood there, stunned, as security quietly approached at Marcus's signal. This can't be happening, he muttered. Vanessa met his eyes one last time. It already did. And just like that, the power dynamic in the room shifted completely. The woman they had dismissed now controlled their futures. But what happened next would shock the entire city. Because Vanessa wasn't done. Not even close. And what she uncovered during the investigation would expose something far bigger than one denied reservation. It would reveal a pattern, a system, and a decision that would cost more than just jobs. 9:15 p.m. It would cost the music at La Belle Maison had stopped. Not because the pianist was told to quit, but because the room no longer felt the same. Conversations had dulled into whispers. Guests kept glancing toward the front entrance where security now stood discreetly beside Richard as he gathered his belongings from the manager's office. The illusion of effortless luxury had cracked, and everyone felt it. Vanessa stood near the center of the dining room, calm and composed, as Marcus spoke quietly with assistant manager Elena. The staff had been instructed to continue service, but their movements were stiff, distracted. Fear does that. Vanessa finally turned to Elena. How long have you worked here? 3 years, Elena replied, her voice steady but nervous. And how long has this been happening? Elena hesitated. Vanessa didn't blink. Be honest. Elena swallowed. About a year. Marcus's jaw tightened. Vanessa's expression didn't change. A year of what exactly? Elena glanced around before answering. Selective seating. Overbooking certain nights. Canceling reservations if they didn't look like our typical clientele. And who defined typical? Vanessa asked softly. Elena's silence was answer enough. Vanessa exhaled slowly. When she had acquired majority shares in La Belle Maison 6 months earlier, the numbers looked promising. Revenue was climbing. Reviews were mostly positive. Profit margins exceeded projections. But numbers never tell the whole story. That's why she visited her properties unannounced. That's why she made reservations under her own name instead of sending assistants. Culture cannot be audited from a spreadsheet. It has to be felt. And tonight, she felt it. Marcus stepped closer. We can pull security footage for the last 6 months. Cross-reference canceled reservations with demographic data. Vanessa nodded. Do it. Elena looked alarmed. It wasn't just Richard. Vanessa met her eyes. I know. Across the room, the hostess, Brittany, sat in a chair near the bar, pale and shaken. 2 servers stood nearby whispering urgently. Vanessa approached them slowly. The servers straightened immediately. Relax, Vanessa said evenly. I'm not here to intimidate anyone. I'm here to understand. She looked directly at Brittany. Who trained you? Brittany's voice trembled. Richard did. And what were you told? That we protect the brand. How? By keeping standards high. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. And what are those standards? Brittany's eyes filled with tears. Guests who fit the image. Influencers. Investors. People who look like they belong. And tonight, Vanessa said quietly, I didn't look like I belonged. It wasn't a question. Brittany couldn't answer. Vanessa let the silence settle. Then she said something no one expected. Do you know why I bought this place? No one spoke. Because when it first opened 12 years ago, I couldn't get a table. A ripple of surprise moved through the staff. I was 29, fresh off securing my second hotel contract. I walked in to celebrate, and I was told there were no reservations available. Her gaze drifted slightly, remembering. I watched 3 groups walk in after me and get seated immediately. Marcus had heard this story before, but never here. I told myself that one day, Vanessa continued, I would own spaces like this, and I would make sure no one else felt invisible inside them. The weight of her words pressed into the room. So when I saw the opportunity to invest here, I took it. She looked around slowly. But ownership means nothing if the culture rots underneath. Elena stepped forward carefully. Miss Cole, not everyone agreed with Richard. I'm counting on that, Vanessa replied. At that moment, Marcus's phone buzzed. He checked the screen and his expression hardened. It's worse than we thought. Vanessa held his gaze. Show me. He turned the phone toward her. Screenshots. Internal messages from a staff group chat. Vanessa scrolled slowly. Don't seat walk-ins unless they match the vibe. If they don't look high-end, mark as no-show. Protect the aesthetic. Each message timestamped. Each tied to management directives. Vanessa's fingers stopped scrolling. Who else is in this chat? Most of front of house. Marcus replied quietly. Vanessa handed the phone back. Send copies to legal. Across the restaurant, a couple stood abruptly. A woman in a red dress approached Vanessa. Excuse me, she said hesitantly. Is it true you own this place? Yes. The woman hesitated again. We had a reservation last month. Anniversary dinner. We were told we arrived too late, and our table was given away. Vanessa listened carefully. We arrived 10 minutes early, the woman added. Vanessa felt a cold clarity settle over her. How did that make you feel? She asked gently. Vanessa nodded once. I'm sorry. It wasn't a corporate apology. It was personal. The woman returned to her table. And that's when Vanessa made her next decision. Marcus, she said quietly. Call PR. He raised an eyebrow. Tonight. Within 30 minutes, the local media relations director for Cole Hospitality Group was looped in. Vanessa gathered the staff near the entrance. This restaurant will be closing for 3 days. Guests again. We will conduct a full operational review. Diversity and service retraining will be mandatory before reopening. Richard, still standing with security, shook his head in disbelief. You're overreacting, he muttered. Vanessa looked at him calmly. No, she said. I'm correcting. She turned back to the staff. Anyone found participating in discriminatory practices will be terminated. Brittany began to cry openly now. Vanessa's voice softened. This is not about destroying livelihoods. It's about rebuilding integrity. She paused. And those who demonstrate accountability will have the opportunity to stay. There it was. Not vengeance. Reform. But consequences first. Marcus leaned in slightly. There's something else. What? We've identified at least 12 formal complaints in the last 8 months. All dismissed internally. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. 12 people. 12 moments. 12 quiet humiliations. All right, she said. Her voice had changed again. Stronger. Tomorrow morning, we call each of them personally. Marcus nodded. Offer refunds. More than that, Vanessa replied. Invite them back as honored guests. On us. Publicly. Richard scoffed softly. You'll ruin the brand. Vanessa turned to him slowly. No, she said evenly. We're about to define it. Outside, word had already begun spreading. Guests were posting. Whispers were turning into tweets. A CEO just fired the manager mid-service. Something big happened at La Belle Maison. Vanessa knew by morning the story would be everywhere. But she wasn't afraid of attention. She was afraid of silence. Because silence is what allows systems like this to thrive. And tonight, silence had been broken. Security escorted Richard out. The door closed behind him. And for the first time all evening, the air felt lighter. Vanessa looked around at the staff one final time. We reopen in 3 days, she said calmly. But when we do, it will not be the same restaurant. She glanced at Elena. You're in charge until then. Elena nodded, eyes wide but determined. Vanessa picked up her purse. Marcus followed. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, camera flashes flickered faintly across the street. Reporters were already gathering. Marcus looked at her carefully. Are you ready for what this will become? Vanessa looked back at the glowing restaurant sign. I didn't buy this place to be comfortable, she said quietly. I bought it to change it. And by morning, the entire city would know exactly what happened inside those doors. But what no one knew yet was that one of the terminated staff members wasn't going down quietly. And the retaliation they were planning would test Vanessa's leadership like never before. Across town, Richard watched the press conference from his apartment, jaw tight, fingers digging into the armrest of his couch. Every calm word Vanessa spoke felt like a personal attack. Every chart displayed on the screen felt like a nail sealing his reputation shut. When she mentioned manual cancellation, his stomach dropped. He knew exactly who had clicked that button. He had. But admitting that, even to himself, meant admitting the pattern wasn't accidental. It was intentional. His phone kept buzzing. Former colleagues texting. A few loyal staff members blaming Vanessa. Others distancing themselves quickly. One message stood out. HR contacted me. They have screenshots. Richard's pulse quickened. Screenshots meant evidence. Evidence meant this wasn't just a social media battle anymore. This was legal. Back at headquarters, Vanessa stepped away from the podium as reporters continued shouting questions. She didn't rush. She didn't hide. She answered what needed answering and declined what didn't. Transparency without spectacle. When the conference ended, Marcus leaned in close. That was strong, he said quietly. Vanessa exhaled slowly. Strength isn't loud, she replied. It's consistent. By late afternoon, the full internal audit report had landed in her inbox. It was worse than initial findings. Reservation manipulation. Guest profiling notes embedded in private staff comments. Codes used to flag customers who didn't fit the look. Vanessa read each page carefully, her expression growing colder not with anger, but with clarity. Culture had not simply slipped. It had been shaped. She called Elena. How are the staff responding? Elena hesitated before answering. A few have already resigned. Vanessa nodded even though Elena couldn't see it. Fear is normal. Accountability is required. Keep documenting everything. As evening approached, Richard made one final move. He contacted a local radio host known for controversial takes and went live on air. He framed himself as a victim of corporate overreach. He questioned Vanessa's leadership. He implied she was leveraging identity for sympathy. The interview spread quickly online, sparking heated debates. Marcus stormed into Vanessa's office with the clip playing. He's escalating, he said. Vanessa listened without interrupting. When it ended, she simply said, then we finish this properly. Within an hour, Cole Hospitality's legal team issued a cease and desist regarding defamation and release of manipulated internal communications. Simultaneously, the company uploaded full, unedited logs to an independent review board to ensure third-party verification. No hidden edits. No selective framing. Complete transparency. That move changed everything. By nightfall, public sentiment shifted sharply. Analysts on business channels began praising Vanessa's handling of the crisis. Former guests came forward sharing similar experiences at other establishments, thanking her for speaking up. Influencers who had once bragged about exclusive access now found themselves questioned about how that exclusivity had been maintained. Richard's support began thinning. In his apartment, he refreshed his social media feed obsessively, watching followers drop. Sponsors distanced themselves. The radio host posted a follow-up clarification after reviewing the release data. The narrative Richard tried to control was slipping through his fingers. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat alone in her office as the city lights flickered on outside. Marcus had gone home. The calls had slowed. The noise was fading. But she knew this wasn't over. Because scandals don't end when the truth is revealed. They end when change is proven. And tomorrow morning, she would walk back into La Belle Maison, not as a customer, not as an undercover test, but as a leader rebuilding something from the ground up. What she didn't know yet was that one final discovery buried deep in the audit logs would reveal that Richard hadn't acted alone at the highest level. Someone above the restaurant had quietly encouraged the strategy, and exposing that person would shake her entire company. The next morning began earlier than usual. Vanessa arrived at headquarters before sunrise, the city still wrapped in a soft gray haze. She carried no entourage, no dramatic entrance, just a leather folder tucked under her arm, and the same calm focus that had carried her through every acquisition battle of her career. Marcus was already in the conference room, sleeves rolled up, coffee untouched, eyes fixed on a projection screen filled with audit data. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted quietly. Vanessa nodded. "Show me what you found." Marcus tapped the screen and enlarged a thread buried deep within internal communications. At first glance, it looked routine: performance metrics, revenue goals, VIP engagement strategies. But then a particular phrase repeated itself across multiple weeks: maintain brand filtration standards as discussed. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. Who wrote that? Marcus zoomed in. The sender wasn't Richard. It was Daniel Mercer, Regional Operations Director. Vanessa felt something shift internally, not shock, but disappointment. Daniel had been with Cole Hospitality for 7 years. Polished, strategic, trusted. He oversaw 5 properties, including La Belle Maison. If Richard shaped the culture inside the restaurant, Daniel shaped the expectations above it. Scroll, Vanessa said quietly. More messages appeared. Guidance on curating clientele. Encouragement to prioritize image alignment. Subtle language, but unmistakable in implication. And then one line that changed everything. Revenue spikes when exclusivity is enforced. Don't dilute the aesthetic. Vanessa leaned back slowly. This wasn't rogue behavior, Marcus said. It was incentivized. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. Not out of weakness, but calculation. How high does it go, she asked. We're still tracing. But so far, only Daniel. Vanessa stood. Call him. Daniel answered on the 3rd ring, voice smooth as ever. Vanessa, I was just about to reach out. This situation is unfortunate. Yes, she replied evenly. It is. I need you at headquarters. Now. An hour later, Daniel walked into the conference room wearing a tailored gray suit and practiced confidence. He greeted Marcus with a nod before turning to Vanessa. I assume this is about the press coverage. It's about policy, she corrected calmly. Marcus rotated the screen toward him. Daniel's composure flickered for a split second when he saw his own messages projected. He began smoothly. Brand filtration refers to maintaining service standards. Vanessa held his gaze. Explain aesthetic alignment. Daniel hesitated only briefly. Every luxury brand curates its image. At the expense of fairness? She asked. He shifted his weight. Perception drives profitability. And discrimination drives perception? Vanessa's tone remained steady, but the air in the room tightened. Daniel exhaled slowly. This is being blown out of proportion. Richard executed poorly. That doesn't make the strategy flawed. Marcus stiffened. Vanessa didn't. Say that again, she said softly. Daniel met her eyes. Exclusivity works. The silence that followed was heavy. Vanessa stepped closer to the table, resting her palms lightly on its surface. When I built this company, she said quietly, I did it by expanding access to luxury, not restricting it. Daniel's jaw tightened. And yet revenue increased under this model. There are many ways to increase revenue, she replied. Not all of them are ethical. Daniel straightened. If you dismantle exclusivity, you dilute brand value. Vanessa's voice dropped slightly. If brand value depends on exclusion, then it deserves to be diluted. Marcus felt the finality in her tone. Daniel tried a different angle. Investors may not agree. Vanessa didn't blink. They invest in me. The room went still again. Effective immediately, she continued. You are relieved of your duties pending full review. Daniel's confidence cracked. You're making a mistake. No, she said calmly. I'm correcting one. Security was called, not dramatically, but professionally. Daniel gathered his belongings in silence, though the tension in his posture betrayed his disbelief. As he exited the building, employees in the hallway avoided eye contact. Word traveled fast in corporate environments. Once the door closed behind him, Marcus let out a long breath. That was bigger than Richard. Yes, Vanessa replied, and more dangerous. Because Richard had been visible, Daniel had been strategic, and strategy spreads quietly. Over the next several hours, Vanessa ordered a company-wide cultural audit across all properties. Anonymous employee surveys were activated. Reservation data from every restaurant was flagged for pattern analysis. External consultants specializing in ethical operations were contracted immediately. This wasn't damage control. This was reconstruction. By midday, financial analysts began speculating publicly about internal restructuring at Cole Hospitality. Stock dipped slightly, not dramatically, but enough to catch attention. Vanessa monitored the numbers without panic. Short-term instability often precedes long-term strength. Then Marcus entered her office again, expression serious. There's something else you need to see. He placed a tablet on her desk displaying an email exchange from 6 months earlier, the week Vanessa finalized her majority acquisition of La Belle Maison. The sender, Daniel. The recipient, Richard. Subject line, transition strategy. Vanessa read carefully. Daniel had anticipated Vanessa's involvement. He had warned Richard that the new majority owner valued inclusivity, and he had advised maintaining surface-level compliance while protecting high-yield clientele quietly. Vanessa's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the tablet. He hadn't just encouraged the behavior. He had concealed it from her. That's intentional deception, Marcus said. Yes, Vanessa replied quietly. Trust, once broken at leadership level, fractures deeper than public scandals. She stood and walked once more to the window overlooking the skyline. The city looked the same as it had yesterday. Traffic moving, buildings gleaming, people unaware of the decisions shaping the spaces they would walk into tonight. Prepare a board meeting, she said finally. Marcus nodded. Emergency session? Yes, because this was no longer about one restaurant. It was about the foundation of her company. And foundations either hold or collapse. That evening, as board members joined the virtual session, Vanessa presented everything. The messages, the concealment, the data trends. She spoke with precision, not emotion. By the end of the meeting, the vote was unanimous. Daniel Mercer was terminated for breach of fiduciary duty and violation of company ethics. But the real shift happened after the vote. Vanessa proposed a permanent structural change, the creation of an ethics and inclusion oversight division with independent authority over operational practices. No more quiet filtration. No more coded language. Transparent metrics tied not just to revenue, but to equitable service. The motion passed. When the meeting ended, Marcus looked at her with something close to admiration. You just reshaped the company. Vanessa allowed herself a small, tired smile. She returned alone to La Belle Maison. The restaurant remained closed for restructuring. Chairs were stacked. Lights dimmed. The silence inside felt different now. Not heavy, but reflective. She walked slowly through the dining room, remembering the moment she had been told there were no tables left. It hadn't been anger she felt then. It had been recognition. Systems don't discriminate loudly. They do it politely, with apologies, with smiles, with fully booked excuses. She reached the center of the room and stopped. 3 days from now, the doors would reopen, but not as a curated illusion, as a corrected institution. What Vanessa didn't know yet was that Daniel, furious and humiliated, had already contacted a competitor, offering insider information in exchange for protection. And the battle for integrity was about to expand beyond one company. It was about to become an industry war. Daniel Mercer had built his career on leverage. And now, stripped of his title and reputation, leverage was the only weapon he had left. Within 48 hours of his termination, he met privately with executives from a competing luxury hospitality group. He came prepared: performance reports, strategic outlines, expansion timelines, even internal projections for upcoming property acquisitions. Information he had once been trusted to protect. In exchange, he wanted two things: a senior position and immunity from any public fallout. But Daniel had underestimated one critical detail. Vanessa Cole never moved without anticipating resistance. Back at headquarters, Cole Hospitality's legal team had already flagged unusual download activity from Daniel's corporate accounts the night before his termination. Files transferred, documents accessed outside his operational scope, timestamps that told their own story. Marcus entered Vanessa's office holding a printed report. "He's shopping information," he said plainly. Vanessa didn't look surprised. "File the injunction," she replied. By that afternoon, Daniel received formal notice: breach of contract, violation of confidentiality agreements, and pending civil action if proprietary data was distributed. The competitor he approached, unwilling to entangle themselves in legal warfare, quietly withdrew their interest. For the first time since the scandal began, Daniel realized he had miscalculated. He had assumed Vanessa was reacting emotionally. He hadn't understood she was executing strategically. 3 days later, La Belle Maison reopened. But the reopening wasn't flashy. No celebrity ribbon cutting. No influencer previews. Instead, the first guests invited through the doors were the 12 individuals whose complaints had been dismissed over the past year. They arrived uncertain, some skeptical, all curious. Vanessa stood at the entrance personally, greeting each of them by name. Not as a CEO trying to repair optics, but as a host reclaiming purpose. The dining room looked subtly different. The lighting warmer. The staff retrained and diversified. Reservation policies displayed transparently at the front desk. A visible statement framed near the entrance outlining the restaurant's service commitment. Every guest. Every time. Without exception. Inside, Elena now served as general manager, promoted not for seniority, but for integrity. She had helped redesign training modules alongside external consultants. Role-playing scenarios replaced outdated, brand-filtering language. Accountability checkpoints were embedded into performance reviews. Culture wasn't left to chance anymore. It was built deliberately. As dinner progressed, something shifted in the atmosphere. Not just relief. Trust. At one table, the anniversary couple from the previous month laughed freely as servers checked in attentively. At another, a family celebrating a graduation received a handwritten note from Vanessa welcoming them. Word spread quickly again, but this time differently. Restaurant reopens with new leadership. CEO turns scandal into reform. Industry analysts began referencing Cole Hospitality as a case study in crisis management done right. Business schools reached out requesting speaking engagements. Investors who had hesitated now publicly reaffirmed confidence. Revenue dipped briefly during closure, then rebounded stronger than projections within 2 months. But for Vanessa, the numbers were secondary. One evening, several weeks after reopening, she returned alone for dinner. No press, no announcement, just a reservation, again under her real name. She entered quietly. The hostess looked up, smiled warmly, and said, "Good evening, Miss Cole. We're honored to have you." No hesitation, no scanning judgment, just service. Vanessa was seated at a table near the center of the room, the same area where she had once stood confronting Richard. As she looked around, she noticed something different by image anymore. It was diverse. Couples dressed casually beside guests in designer suits. Families beside business partners. Laughter that didn't feel staged. Energy that felt organic. Exclusivity had been replaced with excellence. And excellence proved more powerful. Marcus joined her halfway through the meal. "You were right," he said quietly. "About?" she asked. "Transparency." Vanessa considered that. "Transparency isn't comfortable," she replied. "But neither is truth when it's avoided." Across the city, other restaurant owners had begun reviewing their own policies. Quietly adjusting. Quietly recalibrating. Because what happened at La Belle Maison had sent a message beyond one establishment. Discrimination disguised as branding was no longer invisible. It was risky. Months later, Daniel's civil case concluded with a settlement and permanent industry blacklisting clause. Richard, after several failed attempts to defend his narrative publicly, faded from headlines. But the story didn't end with their downfall. It ended with a standard. One evening, as Vanessa prepared to leave the restaurant after finishing her meal, a young woman approached her hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said. "I just wanted to say, I applied here twice last year and never heard back. I assumed I wasn't the right fit. I reapplied after reopening. Today was my first shift." Vanessa studied her for a moment. "How was it?" she asked. The young woman smiled. "I felt like I belonged." Vanessa returned the smile softly. "That's the only fit that matters." As she stepped outside into the night air, the restaurant behind her glowing warmly, Vanessa reflected on how close the situation had come to becoming just another quiet incident, another polite dismissal buried beneath profits. But leadership isn't proven when things run smoothly. It's proven when discomfort demands decision. She had been told there were no tables left. What they really meant was, no space for you. And instead of arguing for a seat, she chose to rebuild the room. The lesson spread far beyond one restaurant. Power isn't in firing staff. It's in correcting systems. Reputation isn't protected by silence. It's protected by integrity. And true luxury isn't about who you exclude. It's about how you serve. La Belle Maison thrived, not because it was exclusive, but because it was equitable. And Vanessa Cole never again needed to test whether she belonged in a room she owned, because she had ensured that anyone who walked through those doors would never have to question whether they did.